Now that we have our data and our model set up, it's time to start thinking about what we're actually going to build and what we're actually going to visualize and what we're going to try to surface or bring out of this data set. Again, this is a fairly small data set. For this infographic, we're not expecting miracles. We just want to try to find, a couple of threads or stories or narratives that we can, bring to the surface that somebody might find interesting, to try to make an infographic that someone is going to enjoy reading through. And I don't really have a set rule for infographics, but I've built a ton of infographics, and especially when I don't have a lot of guidance on what the infographic should include, I try to find three stories. Why three? I don't really know. I do feel like two is not a lot. Four's maybe a bit too much, although I've definitely done 4-story infographics, but three is kind of the number that I tend to settle on, especially when I'm just demonstrating, how to build an infographic, and I'm trying to make sure that my students kind of get the point. But another way of sort of phrasing why I try to find sort of three narratives is I tell people, if you're going to tell them three things, tell them one thing that is, one thing that's interesting, and one thing to do. So for the one thing that is, I try to do a bunch of summary stuff. For that section, let's, for example, in this data set, tell people how many transactions there have been, what total sales are, what the average order size is. I mean, you can tell them multiple things that is or are. It's just we're going to have one section that's just very descriptive stuff. Maybe what our best seller is, what our worst seller is. We're going to tell people some interesting things about our products. For the second section, tell them something that's interesting. Maybe we want to focus on the transaction or time series stuff. Maybe we want to tell people, what times of day are busiest. Maybe we want to tell people, maybe we're open for too long, or maybe there's, maybe we're opening our stores too soon, or maybe one store in particular performs fantastically at a specific time of day. We want to try to get people thinking about, how we might be able to maximize our revenue across these three different Kraken coffee stores at different times of day. And then for our final section, when you're building an infographic, is I like to try to come up with something that a hypothetical reader or viewer of this infographic could walk away with as kind of a call to action. So the point of the infographic is to try to give someone a quick and interesting understanding that they're going to remember of what's happening in the data, what are we seeing in the data, what's interesting about the data, and what can I possibly do with it if I'm a worker at one of these stores, or if I'm a manager of one of these stores, or if I'm otherwise just an employee of Kraken Coffee. So for no particular reason, other than just to try to give you some things to think about and build what I believe will be an engaging infographic, we're going to organize our entire infographic according to those three themes. We're going to make sure that our audience knows something that is, in other words, what our top products is, how things are going, how much money we've made. We're going to tell people something that's interesting, and in that we're going to try to kind of glean something interesting from the time series component of our data. And then for the final thing, we're going to try to do a call to action. And in this case, since we're dealing with a data set that only extends from let's go ahead and sort this, that only extends from January 1st through June 30th of 2023. In other words, this is half a year of data. For our call to action piece, we're going to try to come up with something in the third part of our story that's going to help people understand, what we're trying to accomplish for the remainder of the year. We only have half a year of Kraken Coffee data. So what do we want people to take away from this in order to ensure the success of Kraken Coffee for the remainder of 2023? That's going to be kind of the closing theme or thesis of our infographic. And of course, in order to do all of this, we're actually going to have to do something in this report that we haven't done so far in the course, and we're going to actually write some DAX. And I promise DAX can be scary. I know if you're new to Power BI, we're going to start with some stupid, easy DAX, really simple, straightforward stuff. And then we're going to build on that DAX, on the early DAX that we write in the course, with some subtly more difficult or more complex DAX, but we're always going to be building on things that we've already done. And I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks along the way. Absolutely nothing that you can't handle. And of course, we're only going to be scratching the surface. We're talking real tip of the iceberg stuff with DAX, but hopefully it'll show you some techniques and methods that you can use in your DAX journey and throughout this course to sort of continue building. DAX is just like anything else. It takes tons of practice, but the best place to start is just by getting your feet wet. No real pun intended with the whole Kraken, Koffee, ocean themes. But I promise, I'm going to make this DAX as not scary as I possibly can. But first, before we do any DAX at all, let's go ahead and jump back into our Power Query editor over here. And I'm just going to create a couple of tables. And I'm not going to put any data in these. These tables are just going to exist to hold our DAX measures. And I usually call them underscore something, for no other reason that I want these tables to appear at the top of my list of tables in the report builder. So let's go ahead and call this first one O1 core measures. And so this table is going to contain all of our very, very basic measures that we're going to be using time and time again. For our next measure table, I'm just going to right click and I'm just going to reference this table again. And I'm going to call this reference table, you know what, let's just call this nested measures. All of the measures in here are going to reference or use the measures that we have up here in some manner. Next, I'm going to create, actually, let's just reference the tables again. Since these tables don't contain any data, we can just keep referencing them, and it's not going to cause us any issues. Next, we're going to create a table, and I'm just going to call this formatting and text. Some of this will make more sense once we start building, but I know I'm going to do some text manipulation in DAX later on. So I'm just going to give myself a specific place to put those measures. One of the things that I find makes DAX the most complicated to newcomers is that because they're new and they haven't done a lot of DAX before, they don't know how to organize it all. And I can't tell you how important just organizing all of your DAX, even if it's organized in a sense that only makes sense to you, and not necessarily someone else who might open this Power BI report. For example, maybe the way that I'm organizing my measures, you're going to think, Sean, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to do that. That's fine. I want to emphasize that, ultimately the product that we're building is the report itself. I don't care at all how you organize the measures that we're going to write in this class or in other courses or in other lessons. Do it in a way that makes sense to you. Ultimately, you just want to be able to find your DAX measures and references between those DAX measures as easily as possible. So I'm going to organize all of my DAX measures across 3 tables. And again, they're all empty. None of them contain any data. Since they don't contain any data, we don't need to worry about refreshing them. Let's go ahead and turn off report refresh on all of these tables. There they are at the top. And as soon as I start adding measures or DAX calculations to these tables, they will automatically convert into DAX measure tables, which is what we want. And I'll demonstrate that once we start actually writing some DAX. But at least now we've got 3 tables set up to sort of help us organize all of the calculations that we're going to use in this report. And so let's go ahead and jump into it and start writing some of our first DAX.